Okay, today we're joined by my friend Phil Escott. Phil, welcome.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful to have you here, and I've really enjoyed over the last couple of months getting to know you and hearing more about your story, specifically your health journey and your recovery from several autoimmune conditions. So I really wanted to get you on the podcast and for you to share your story with my audience so that others can learn from your journey. So, Phil, how did you come to this crazy world of only eating meat?
It was a very long journey.
Yeah.
It was I'm an old dude now. I was born in 1962, and I grew up on meat and two veg, and that was fine, like most of us did in those days. And in those days you could stay pretty healthy on that. But then, around age 18, I got into all the traveling kind of lifestyle, the sort of hippie thing. And so everybody was on macrobiotic stuff and ripping their guts to bits with brown rice and lentils. And
Mm.
so I got into that. And I just remember, the horrendous discomfort, the gastric discomfort. And I thought, I really should have tweaked it at the time before it got anywhere else. But I didn't. I was that dim. And then I traveled around with the free festivals and all the British convoy crowd. It was an amazing time actually. But then I thought, right, it's time to settle down around 1986. I'm going to give up playing because I was a musician at the time, playing a load of weird jazz in London and all sorts of things. And I thought 1986, I'm going to move up to Skelmersdale in the UK, which was the like the center for the transcendental meditation movement. And I thought I just want to be a yogi the rest of my life. Embarrassingly, that didn't work out because I ended up being dragged out of retirement and signed up to a band that got signed to Stock Aitken Waterman, the Pete Waterman's label. And it was like, that was embarrassing because I was a jazzer, right? And here I was playing pop music.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was a TM teacher, the guy who ran the band, and I was in this community and got even more into the whole vegetarian thing because that's what you do if you want to get enlightened, right? And this is one of my pet subjects of how religion and spirituality have misled us with diet, over the centuries. And we wrote about this a lot in a recent book that we did called The Red Pill Food Revolution that Ben Hunt put most of it together, and it's just, I have to say what a brilliant writer he is, and just that book goes through the history of it, how we've been fooled in all those ways. But I ended up veggie from probably about 1980 till about 2010. I had bits where I ran a gym, and so I'd eat safe things like skinless chicken breasts and eggs and dairy and that kind of thing, and added that to all the other crap I was eating. And I got pretty big. The body is very resilient, and you can survive on that kind of thing for a long time. But mostly plant-based. I mean, I call plant-based a regular sad diet as well, because people go, oh well, the meat is the evil and whatever. But these people eat 90% plants anyway, don't they? They got all their cereals and sandwiches and all that kind of crap. So that's what I was doing. Sometimes I would try and be very, very healthy and eat just rice and dal and Indian vegetarian sort of sattvic, a holy type cooking, and those sort of 80 ingredient meals, and awful, and then you'd spend the rest of the day eating Rennies or whatever, those antacids to stop you farting and refluxing and Jesus. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, and then it all really, there was a lot of whispers, even from the mid 80s, where I was having problems with sacroiliac joints. And I thought, that's probably just because I'm sitting in lotus position too much and bouncing around on foam mattresses, pretending to create world peace from learning to fly, with the TM movement and all that craziness. But then, I would spend a lot of time at chiropractors and osteopaths and whatever, getting my back crunched out until I knew so many of them and they became friends. I learned all these techniques. And when I ran a gym, if anybody hurt their back or whatever, they'd be on the ground, I'd crunch them out and whatever. But I didn't go to the root cause because I didn't for one moment think that it was what I was eating. And in the mid 90s, I wrote a book, even on well, it was mostly on Ayurvedic medicine, but it was still pushing plant-based stuff. And it didn't really hit home until the early 2000s when I started to just eat any old junk, really. I mean, not like donuts and stuff like that, but I would have cereal for breakfast. I'd have some Ayurvedic type curry thing for lunch, and then I'd have a wheelbarrow full of pasta and cheese in the evening, probably chased down with half a bucket of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. And so, it was no wonder things went wrong.
Mm.
And I started piling a load of fat onto the muscle that I'd built, so it wasn't very visible. And by 2010, um, I ended up just really, it seemed quick to me, but obviously it wasn't. I think the body had just given up. And I ended up, I remember my right ankle blew up, and then my left one, then my left knee. And then I was just in so much pain that I couldn't move really. I was, any movement was agony, even pain at rest. It was sort of suicidal level pain. And eventually they diagnosed it as psoriatic arthritis. But as we know now, all autoimmunity is basically the same thing. But because of my plant-based years, I thought the best thing to do is to go vegan. So I went vegan, and then I went raw vegan, and then I went fruitarian with juicing up a load of spinach and that
Oh,
kind of
wow.
thing. And
Jeez.
so obviously, it did nothing to my symptoms particularly, but it did leave me emaciated and with kidney stones. So, I think it was about 2011 when I finally went keto. And by that time, I'd lost about 90 pounds when I went keto and ended up ripped for the first time in my life. The trouble is, I was about 120 pounds at 5'10". So it
Yeah.
didn't look very impressive. And gradually over those 3 years, well, 3 or 4 years from 2011 to 2015, I went keto, ate a load more fatty meat, got out of trouble, ended up playing drums again. But there was a few niggly things. And in 2015, I just thought, I feel better on the days where I don't bother with those vegetables roasted in coconut oil to go with my steak. And I just can't be bothered cooking them. I don't like them very much. I mean, who really does like vegetables if they're not covered in butter? So I never did. So I just stopped, and there wasn't that much information out there at the time, was there? I mean, I remember reading early on or hearing Natasha Campbell McBride say, "I've got some patients who eat nothing but meat and they're doing beautifully." And I thought, well, that's, I don't need to go that far, obviously, but I did. If I had known in 2010 what I know now, well, preferably in the early 80s, but in 2010 when I got in real trouble, if I'd have known then what I know now and gone fully carnivore, just fatty beef and lamb, the classic autoimmune reversal diet, I would have probably, 3 months, I'd have been in a bit more discomfort and then I'd been out of it with no joint damage whatsoever. Now, unfortunately, due to messing about, I got it out of about 30 joints with no damage, but, one knee's wrecked, one wrist is wrecked. I don't know how I play drums actually with that wrist, but somehow I've adapted and I seem to be able to do it. I've got some of the movement back, but, because I messed about for too long, there was some damage. But now, yeah, no inflammation or anything. And it's what are we now? Sort of coming up to my 10th year, I suppose, carnivore. And at times I haven't quite figured out that you really need to leave out the pork, chicken, dairy, and eggs, and did get in trouble in 2022. Went on Anthony's podcast to talk about that. But knowing what I know now, I got out of it in about 3 months, whereas it took me about 3, 4 years before. And so that's my story of coming to carnivore, really.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah. What a journey. I kind of like your approach of being like sort of almost like avoiding the damage. Like when you were talking about the joints there, you're like, I managed to get away with it almost, but the arthritis is still in a couple of the joints. And I think when you sort of do come to carnivore and you do it for a long time, you start to view those periods of your life and those times when you have had plants as sort of this exposure to toxins, which it is, and the more you can minimize that, the better. But for many of us, there has been a period of damage, and you can reverse some of it, but you can't maybe quite get it all out, or it takes a lot of effort to get out a lot of the damage.
This is one of the problems with carnivore, you see, that it's too effective. And that now I can eat whatever I like within that range, as much as I like, and I stay lean, and I don't have any pain. And so the motivation isn't as high. And I'm pretty lazy a lot of the time. And I've got, ultrasound machines sitting in there. I've got, castor oil, massage, magnets. You can use a lot of things to break down the soft tissue damage in a joint on the synovium once it's been damaged. And I've done a bit of it, but I really need more motivation. It's like training as well. You stay lean, so you don't really have that motivation to train. But I tell you what, having been to Spain a couple of weeks ago and spent a week with Anthony and sitting next to him in Q&As and whatever and looking like a toothpick next to him, it has really inspired me that I need to start training again. And I do sporadically to hold on to what I've got. But to get back into like I used to, I think it would be really nice finally in my 60s to not I've been ripped, I've been big, but I've never been both. And it'd be quite I don't have any ambitions to be huge anymore, but just to have, a bit more muscle and also to be ripped. And it's not really that hard, is it, on carnivore? It's just
No,
getting that motivation, after years of horrible pain. When you're out of pain, you just kind of go, great, I'm out of pain. I'm 99% better than I was. And so you get lazy. But yeah, you can reverse damage. You can. I mean, if it's gone into the actual bones and cartilage, it's more difficult, but still, not beyond the realms of possibility.
being the massive and the ripped Phil Escott emerge over the next 12 months or so. It's got to happen.
Let's see. Well, I did say in my talk, that in Spain that watch this space. I'm going to come back looking like Anthony next year, and they all burst out laughing. And I said, "What's so
Yeah.
funny?" It was disgraceful. I was hurt.
Oh, that's great. But I know what you mean about carnivore. You do sort of get quite comfortable and very satisfied that that there's no pain, that body composition isn't really an issue, and you can eat. You're never hungry or anything like that. So the sort of almost motivation to take the body composition to that next level, it's almost not even on your mind because you're just very sort of comfortable and content with where you're at. I've been like that a lot of the time, which is wonderful. But then sometimes you might see somebody who's in better shape than you, or you start to think, okay, well, I do want to experiment with how far I can take this. I definitely
Yeah,
see where you're coming from.
yeah, yeah. Let's see what I can look like at 70 because
Yeah.
I definitely look better at 60 than I did at 50. So
Okay.
let's see if I can look a lot better at 70. I don't think it's impossible. And as Anthony said, I said to him a while ago, well, you're going to see probably all of this coming to fruition. And I worry about my kids with all the stuff that we can't mention going on and all the things that they planned against us and all the dietary nonsense. And I said, I'm 20 years older than you. And he said, no, no, we live to 130. We should do. And I thought, yeah, cool. We should do, really, shouldn't we? So, barring being hit by a bus, I might get there. You never know.
Yeah, I mean the longevity of carnivores is going to be very interesting to see. We can
Yeah.
already see with Maggie the rancher. She's in her 80s and she looks incredible and she's still so active and she's working full time and running a farm.
Oh God, yeah.
Doing
And I had Mary Ruddick, who you probably have heard of, on my podcast, and she was mentioning about somebody who she met and well, a family, and there was like six generations.
wow.
And the old lady was there, and she was like 120, and she's still dancing with the tribe. And you can see it now, that it's possible. But people, the vegans always attack and go, well, there's no longevity, you're going to die early. But it's about health span, isn't it? Do I really, even if I did live longer, I mean, what's death? It's no big deal, surely. It's just part of life. But living in the amount of agony that I've lived in, I'm now out of it. Am I going to go back and risk getting in a wheelchair to spend an extra 2 years in or something? No chance. And like Sean Baker said once that I thought was quite funny. He said that even if he dies from a rock to the head at 106 years old, the vegans are still going to blame the meat for it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You can't win with them. I mean, Phil, you're a former veggie. How did you get your head around the idea that you needed meat? Was that a really tough thing, particularly being in that community of yogis and meditators?
Well, I never really had the militancy about it. I did used to use those brainwashing terms like chicken periods and cow pus and dead rotting animals and all of that kind of thing. But I never really felt, like I wanted to go and glue myself to an abattoir or something. you know, or give a frozen chicken a funeral in the supermarket, which they have done. I was never an activist or anything. I just thought I was conned into the fact that you couldn't ever get enlightened if you ate meat, and that it was healthier not to. And so it wasn't for me a great disgust of meat because I'd grown up on it. You know, the first 18 years of my life, I ate steak and chips and roast dinners and stuff like that. So I had no problem with it in that way. So it was easier for me. But I've also had an open mind. I've never been somebody to attack somebody who's got a slightly different point of view. You know, it didn't take me long to actually look into the history of anthropology and whatever and see what we actually ate. And it was quite obvious. And I thought all of that study I've done into Ayurvedic stuff and all the different ways that the different foods affect our doshas and all of that kind of thing. And I thought really all I had to do was look at a cave painting. And that would have been a tremendous clue for me. And the motivation of the pain. Well, once you get to that level of pain, like vegans say, oh well, even if I got sick, I would never harm the animals. You just wait, mate. You just wait, and you will be desperate. You'll go through that period where you fast for 30 days, drink your own piss, all that kind of thing. And the other vegans will say, oh, it was all because he fasted for 30 days and drank his own piss. You know, like my friend Tim Sheaf, who came off veganism and got horribly attacked. No, that's just when you're so desperate that you feel there must be some kind of plant-based way to do it. And really there isn't. You know, I poisoned myself during that time with all the smoothies and stuff that were revolting. I didn't want to drink them. My body should have told me, or rather I should have listened to it. It was telling me. And ended up with the kidney stones from the oxalates. But it was for me, it was a lot of it was to do with higher consciousness. And it's probably not really the podcast for this, but I always thought that I'd end up some kind of non-dual teacher, because in 2006, 2005, 2006, I can't quite remember, I decided to give up all my spiritual practices. I just wasn't feeling it anymore. It seemed to be a bit of a carrot and a stick thing, where if you do this, then you'll be better. If you do that, it's all here now in the present. This is good enough. And once you realize that, and there was a moment where I had this real deep awakening, standing out in my back garden of my house, and I had to sit down on this low wall. It was like, that's everything I've ever looked for. It was beautiful, but also so simple. How did I ever miss that? And since then, I'll meditate once every now and again, maybe a little bit, but I don't have any regular practice anymore. I don't need it. I don't want it. Although I think to realize that sort of everybody's all one and whatever, and understand that interconnectedness of nature is a very important thing, but it's no big deal. These tribes are probably in that state of consciousness all the time. And it's built up to be a massive, great big deal. And so then I found when I did start to eat meat again, that not only did it fix a load of mental and physical issues, but it also fixed spiritual issues. Because I think of people who end up on those plant-based diets and do a load of meditation, they can end up very, very weak, very upsettable, very airy-fairy. Maybe as they might put it, sort of caught in the upper chakras, if you like. But you don't build a house from the top down, right? You need some foundations. What's wrong with those lower chakras? Why is it that the spirituality kind of angle has, like the Seventh-day Adventist, trying to get rid of sexual desire and all of that kind of thing? It's evil. No, it's not. This is how they all got there, for God's sake. So to build that foundation of that grounded consciousness, but also have the ability to see, or experience sort of higher states, if you like. And that's what Carnivore did. I have an old podcast. It was only a 10 episode one called Carnivore and Beyond. And the aim was to get really spiritual people on who'd got very sick and to get them talking about how they went keto or carnivore or whatever, and how not only did it help them physically and emotionally and mentally, but also spiritually. Because you get much more respect for nature, don't you? I mean, what respect for nature does a vegan have who lives in a high-rise block of flats or whatever in the north of England, and they're so disconnected from nature. And when you see these tribes and how connected they are, and to say that there was nobody spiritual in any of these tribes is so disrespectful. They all ate meat, predominantly meat. and it goes back millennia. They never had anybody who was in some high state of consciousness. When you look at it that way, it's crazy. So that was one of my biggest blocks, was the whole spiritual side of it. And now I've got some videos on my YouTube channel about, carnivore diet and spirituality, carnivore diet and non-violence, that kind of thing. And I think it's something that a lot of people have to wake up to, because there is that huge thing when people get stuck in that meat is so unholy type of thing. We've got enough of it with these people saying it causes cancer and heart disease, right? When you add that it's unholy as well, people get trapped in some horrendous things. A lot of my friends in this community, as they've hit their 50s, 60s, and 70s, have died from cancer, heart disease, autoimmunity. There's a lot of them, quite a few of them now, who are showing a load of Parkinson's symptoms. I ran into a friend of mine, and I probably shouldn't really mention him, but he runs a health center up here, and he had such a pronounced tremor, in his hand. He could hardly hold the shopping, and I think that's just so tragic, because they're stuck in that way and thinking that they're doing the best thing, and yet they're all dying of that, and they're not eating meat. So it's certainly not the meat, is it? And they are more unhealthy, without a doubt, than the local pizza and pasta eaters. And the only two people in this community I know who've reversed anything serious is me with the arthritis, and my mum when she was up here as well, before she died of pneumonia in 2018. But around 2016, 2017, we reversed her breast cancer. You can see that on my YouTube channel as well, with the whole, the tumor that was about to ulcerate through the skin just disappearing, skin all coming back to normal. And that was when she was about 93 years old. And some of them have twigged on, some of them have now, some of them have attacked me for it, and I've lost a few friends there, but I'm sick of losing them. I'm sick of losing these vegetarians and vegans to all the diseases that they're supposed to never get.
Yeah. I mean, to the sort of rational mind, it makes no sense. But I think when you do have the nutrient depletion, when you do have the brain fog, when you do have, like I know how much eating plants affects your mental health. It does really cloud your judgment, and it makes the world seem like a more difficult place than it really is. And like you were talking about with the spiritual side, people are really searching for answers when the answers are right in front of you. When,
Mm,
life is wonderful already. All you need to do is just eat properly and you'll see it. Um,
perfect. Yeah.
and maybe they won't find out until they hit rock bottom and they do actually nourish themselves with what they truly need.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad that they often have to get to that stage before they wake up. When
Yeah.
I'm arguing with a vegan online, and I really shouldn't do it. I keep swearing I'm going to give it up. But then you get drawn into something, and the predictable conversation goes on. And I just always close with, I hope your awakening isn't as agonizing as mine,
Mm.
because there will be one, and I'd never wish what I had, or any of these other conditions. I'd never wish them on anybody. And they go, oh, the meat eaters are so aggressive and they're always attacking. And it's tremendous projection, because
Mm.
it's funny, you always see a conversation between a carnivore and a vegan, don't you? Whether it's in print or whether it's live. And the vegan's always very upsettable and shifting about and this and that. Or they always end up in caps lock screaming at you, for being a cannibal or something. And and I get, I've had death threats on my YouTube channel. I
Uh,
remember early in the day when Sean had his YouTube channel, and he'd always say a prize below for the best vegan death threat at the end of the video.
yeah, they're an angry bunch and an irrational bunch. And when you're coming
That's-
from, I think when your argument is all just emotion, and it's not coming from any fact, because often they'll quickly accept. I find when I'm having these conversations in the comments, they'll quickly accept that you need to take supplements as a vegan or a vegetarian, and then I'm like, okay, cool. So the nutrition argument's done. And then they can
Exactly.
move on to the sort of ethical, environmental arguments, which, are probably a little bit more of a gray area. I can see where they're coming from, even though I still think they're wrong. Um, yeah,
Well, this is as
it's a
absolutely,
predictable.
absolutely, yes, absolutely no doubt they're wrong about that one. And that's one of the most heartbreaking things, because very often the veganism comes from a good heart.
Mm.
They don't want to do any harm. They're doing the right thing. They've seen a couple of propaganda films that are very convincing, if that's all you've seen. And so they think they're killing fewer animals.
Not
Not the
true.
case, as we've always been, as all of us have expressed with the crop deaths and whatever. But I think it's nature. This is what happened. Ruminant animals roamed the plains and fertilized the ground, and everything was fine. Everything was fine. Not so anymore, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Phil, you mentioned before that a couple of years ago you started incorporating a few other carnivore foods into your diet, and that triggered some of the symptoms to come back. I'd be interested to hear more about that because it's a very tempting route for people who are on the carnivore diet. So I think they can learn a lot from your experience.
Yeah, it was that was a big wake up call for me. So I'd been carnivore sort of 7, 8 years, and I thought, yeah, that's it. The gut's fixed. I can take anything. Every now and again, I would take, I'd have some eggs and bacon or something, or I'd have some egg yolks, even some dairy, and it wouldn't matter because I'd just do it now and again. I'd have no problem at all with it. But that summer, 2022, I was playing a lot of festivals with this terribly disreputable tinfoil hat, rebellious rock band I'm in, and we were playing the freedom festivals. And
Sure.
it was nice actually to see at those festivals, which used to be mostly populated by vegans, how
I was going to ask
many
this. Yeah.
how many are now waking up to carnivory. I mean, we did. I was also doing some talks at them, and I remember one time Ben and I did a talk. Ben Hunt and I, who I ran the Big Fat Challenge with and whatever, and wrote the books with the Red Pill Revolution books, and we did a talk on just winged it. The two of us doing a double act up there, and we had an act. Usually, you can wake up to vegetarians, but a vegan actually. 38-year vegan went out and got their first burger.
Wow.
And then 2 weeks later, at a festival I was playing, she came up and gave me this big hug. And she said, and I was just playing drums there. I wasn't talking or anything. And she said, I can't believe it. The whole life energy has come back into my body. I can't believe how incredible I feel. And it was like about 2 weeks back on the meat. And but anyway, I digress. So during that time, during that particular summer, it was a really hard year as well, financially. And we ended up selling a load of rental houses that we had for almost nothing, over the mortgages, and where I thought that's going to be our pension, if you like. And we really tried, to sort of get things online. We almost became homeless. A millionaire friend of mine bought our house for us. Isn't that cool?
Wow.
Let's say, oh, Peter, come here. They're just going out. Here's my, one of my kids. Now, you see, here's a kid who I abused by feeding way too much meat. He
Yeah.
was breast milk and meat only for the first 4 years until he discovered chocolate, but he still doesn't eat veg or
What a
anything.
lucky boy.
Look how unhealthy he is. He can barely
Yeah.
stand up. So they're going out to this nightmarish amusement park. So have fun.
Yeah.
And you're going on the big one. Okay, this
235 feet high.
how awful. I can't think of anything worse apart from eating a salad. Anyway, oh, go on, have fun.
Fun, Peter.
Yeah, so I thought, I'll be all right. I'll be fine. It's difficult to get fatty beef and lamb on the road, isn't it? It's more difficult than it is to get pork, chicken, dairy, and eggs. So
Yep.
I ate a lot of that, and probably more regularly. And I started to notice a few little things. But it was also a very hard year, emotionally, financially. And it was also a time when there was a load of carnivores who were unmolested by whatever they put into us over the past 4 years, who were also saying that they were getting returns of autoimmune issues. So I don't know. I think there are aspects that I don't really understand. But come that autumn, um, around that time, that was sort of autumn equinox, which is where a lot of people have these kind of detox symptoms, don't they? Um, and around the time where, God forbid, if anybody was to fake a pandemic or anything, that would be the time of year to do it, right? Not that they ever would. Um, and I had suddenly, I was in that much pain. I started losing a load of weight again as well, and I'd lost about 45 pounds that I didn't really need to lose at the time. and ended up so inflamed, the muscle was going. I led up to it with a kidney stone as well during the summer. And I hadn't had one of those since 2012 when I had a big one and had to have it lasered out. I thought it might also be an oxalate component because I was
Yeah.
talking to Sally Norton about that, on my podcast, and I said to her, look, I got kidney stone after like 7 years or whatever, carnivore. I haven't had any oxalates. And she said, well, it takes decades to get rid of these things sometimes. And so, it's a long-term poisoning that we get from these things. So I don't know the full um, sort of amount of causes that happened during that year, but that winter, I was in worse pain than I was back in 2010. I thought I wasn't going to get out of it at one point. I was, on crutches. I couldn't walk. I was absolutely emaciated. I had a CRP of 192. We were going on Anthony's show and talking about it, and he said, "Yeah, that's sepsis level. I was that inflamed." But I got my bloods and done at that time, which I usually never bothered to do. And the local docs, of course, they were freaking out. They said, "Yes, you probably got cancer, and you need to do this and need to do that." And I was saying, "No, even if I have got it, which I haven't." Um, I'll just do the same thing. I'm not going to take any of yours. I just wanted to give the bloods to my friend Jofia Clements, a paleomediciner, because I know she'd interpret them properly. And she's helped my family out so many times. She's fantastic. She's a real good mate. And the results they have there, I mean, they're astonishing, aren't they? A paleomediciner with their PKD diet. Amazing. So anyway, but the thing is, I think the important take home from this is that whereas it took me about 3 or 4 years to get out of it before, messing about with plants that I might need and this and that and eggs and butter and all that sort of thing. This time I went completely PKD. But at the beginning of that, around November, December, I couldn't even eat a ribeye without agony. I couldn't take in any protein. It was just basically bone broth with fat floating around in it and lumps of fat. And that was about all I could take for a while. But I knew what to do. And I got out of it in about 3 months, whereas it took me about 3, 4 years before. And so I never had any doubt. I never thought, right, I'm going to the doctor to have some steroids, or I'm going to add some kind of food in, where I thought before when I got really emaciated, because I've done it twice now. And that emaciation stage is when we did this recent carnivore retreat in Spain and at the last carnivore conference we did in England. One of my big things I wanted to talk about was this emaciation stage. If you do get that sick and the gut is that leaky and you've damaged yourself, there is a period where you can get ridiculously thin. And the temptation is always, oh, shall I add in something else? Shall I add in dairy? Do I need to add in some sweet potatoes? Shall I put, and this does go round in your mind. And Natasha Campbell McBride and Jofia Clements have both spoken about this, that there can be a time where you get very skinny. Just ride it out. Don't worry. If you're eating enough fatty meat, you're getting enough nutrition, the body's doing other things. And it happened again this time. Suddenly with no change in diet, the scales come up again. Probably when the gut's probably sorted again, whatever's happened. But it happened again. And so, I'm back up probably, I don't know, 25 pounds of the 20 I lost. And so I'm fine now. I'm all right. And so I didn't put back any of the fat that I did have from eating the dairy. So, I'm fine now. But it was pretty shocking. And it is a lesson, I think, to people that, once you do have these autoimmune conditions, people always criticize it, saying carnivore diet is not a cure, it just covers the symptoms. I would say no. I'd say, when somebody's had enough of something, and they just don't have tolerance for it anymore, the body's like that too. It's had enough of all the things that were damaging it. And one day it just says no more. If you eat the right things, you can stay healthy. You eat the other things, you're not going to be. And somebody who is autoimmune is probably never going to go back to being able to eat pizza and pasta again. Right. And they've got to watch out for the other carnivore things, the sort of the things outside that kind of PKD area of fatty ruminant meat, because it's all right now and again. It's not going to do anything, but you overload it. Eventually the body's going to say, right, enough. And that's what I did. I would say, yes, it is a cure. I mean, it's like, I often say somebody, they break their foot, they smash it with a hammer or something and break their foot, and then they're going, I can't, when the bone's healing up, I can't wait to smash my foot again. I
Yeah.
mean, why would you want to do that again?
Yeah.
It is a cure because you're coming back to your ancestral diet, and you have one of those bodies that is looking out for you. It's looking out for those toxins. I think this is an interesting thing that Natasha Campbell McBride said beautifully. I had her on the podcast, and I just asked her. I had about 20 questions for her, and the first one was, okay, what is autoimmunity? And it was funny because she just went on for like 20 minutes, and I thought, no way am I going to get any of the other questions in, but this is brilliant. And she just nailed it. And she was saying basically there is no such thing as bad inflammation. That is the body doing something exactly as it's supposed to do. And you've got to find out why it's doing that. It's not the body attacking itself. It's not molecular mimicry. Anthony did a great talk in Spain about this too. And I've seen him mention it since online. That our view of autoimmunity, there probably is no such thing. It's just the body clearing out toxins from various parts of the body where they're lodged, and it's doing good. And so all modern medicine does is shut down this inflammation, which just puts off the problem for the future and stops the body doing its job. And it is hard. I know what it's like to have that horrendous inflammation and think, I'm going to have to ride this out if I'm going to really get rid of it properly. And it's horrible. People always say, what can I do in the meantime? Is there anything I can take? Well, not really, no, because if you shut down that inflammation, you're shutting down the process that's going to get you well in the end. And yeah, that's something I think modern medicine really needs to understand, the importance of inflammation and getting to the root cause of it and not shutting it down.
Yes, Dr. Chafer uses the analogy of lead in the water or like lead pipes. And when you're getting lead poisoning, you stop drinking
Yeah.
water from the lead pipes. And once the lead poisoning symptoms go away, that doesn't mean you go back to the lead pipes. That means the lead pipes were poisoning you. They are the toxins that are doing damage. You stay away from them and you avoid them. And the fact that you've removed them and you've gotten better is a clear sign that they were causing the problem. The plants are causing the problem from what we see when people recover from autoimmune conditions, just like you did by simply removing the plants. It's clear the plants are a massive issue and they're often the cause. So Phil, just to be clear, when you went through this tough period about 2 years ago, you then went back to just fatty ruminant meat. And were you doing anything unusual about, like, say, for example, like meal times or like the way you prepare it or anything like that? What exactly did you do?
Well, I just went back to the PKD ratios really, and there's all sorts of ways of working that out. That PKD, for anybody who doesn't know, Paleolithic ketogenic diet, as they coined it at Paleomedicina, and so everybody calls it PKD now. But it's the ratios of the fat, I think, that's very important. And to get the easiest way to calculate it is like a third fat to two-thirds lean meat on the plate by sight. And you can do it weighing it up, 35 grams of fat for each 100 grams of lean meat, but it gets complicated. Just look at it. It's not rocket science and it's not an exact science either. So if you're in that ballpark, you're going to be getting all the nutrients you need and all the fats that heal up the gut and seal the gut. And they also say organ meats are very important. Not too much, just a little bit, in the ratios of whatever the animal muscle meat would be to the organ meats, just like, a pound of liver a week maybe while you're healing up, which I think isn't necessary when you're a healthy long-term carnivore. You probably don't need any of that. And you can get into trouble by eating too much of it. Look at certain carnivore influencers now who've started piling in a load of fruit, probably to stop the uptake of it. But yeah, I think that it's the ratios that are important because this is not a high protein diet. Still, the proteins from even really great grass-fed beef and lamb can get through a leaky gut and cause some issues. It's not anything that's going to keep the gut leaky or that will do you any harm, but those things should not be getting through undigested, and the body can be sort of trying to clear those out. You can get some inflammation. And I often use the analogy of turning off the engine in a ferry, so that it just rolls on. It's not going to stop immediately, but you shut the engines off and don't expect to be healed in a day or two. Things are still going to be painful. And so, but just keep on with that PKD thing, those PKD ratios. Don't freak out if you lose too much weight. That's what I did, and just kept to that and had complete confidence in it. And yeah, it turned it around quite quickly this time. So I would just eat, I would eat casseroles, but I'd make sure I'd throw a whole load of tallow in to get the ratios up. I'd have a steak and add a load more tallow. One of my favorite things, I think, is lamb chops. I mean, those are probably my favorite food, along with short ribs, fatty short ribs, roasted slowly in the oven, or lamb chops. I mean, just grilled. They're just all automatically PKD ratio and taste so good. I mean, lamb fat, my God, it's just so gorgeous. And I just did that, and that's what I'm still doing. And it's working, and I've learned my lesson, I mean, it's now in the last couple of years, yes, I have had some eggs, some butter, but very rarely. I actually had scrambled eggs yesterday with a load of butter with no ill effects whatsoever. I tipped half of the whites away, but I very seldom do that. Probably only like twice a year. But if the body does tell you things, your cravings get so subtle when you're carnivore. It's not like, right, I need a bar of chocolate and some Haagen-Dazs, right? It's now the cravings are much more subtle. You know if it's a lamb day. You know if you might need some oysters or some oily fish. I do anyway. And know if it's a beef day and I want something slow cooked or I want something fried. I want a steak in the air fryer. I want, and yesterday I had a massive craving for scrambled eggs, so I just went for it. I thrown on some burgers. I won't do it again, probably not for another few months, but if I did that every day, I'd be in trouble. Um, but something my body wanted. And the same thing happens with like chicken and pork. Every now and again, I'll have a real craving for it. So I'll do it, but I would never do any of those things during a healing phase. Reintroduce those things if you like, but bear in mind that they're not ideal and they might get you in trouble. And if you get any little whispers that it's wrong, don't push it. And just, if your body craves it, then that's fine. That's fine. So I'm probably 97% PKD now. Once in a blue moon, I'll have something else. But what got me in trouble was being probably 40% PKD and 60% right. I'll eat any other animal than pork, chicken, and dairy. That's what got me in trouble. And if you have a little bit, that's fine. But so that's what I did basically. But during that healing phase, until the inflammation had died down, yeah, fatty beef and lamb, that was it.
Love it. At risk of opening up a whole can of worms, Phil, I'd like to hear a little bit about the light health piece of your journey, because I know it's something that's really
Ah,
important to you. And I think it's something that a lot of carnivores haven't quite gotten into. And those that have dipped their toe have often fallen all the way down the rabbit hole. So maybe you can red pill a few carnivores now about the missing piece in the health puzzle, which is potentially light health.
yeah, my lesson on how to make your house look like the only brothel in the street. With all the red light coming out of the windows.
You probably get some suspect knocks on the door.
Yeah, well, actually, we haven't, but I often wonder if they might come at some point. Yeah, it started with me when I started to look at Jack Cruse's stuff. And Jack Cruse was, he had such amazing stuff out, even in 2011 or so when I discovered him. And he already had these sort of interminable blog posts that you couldn't understand 99% of,
Hmm.
but you could get, but it's just so deep scientific stuff he would come out with. But the actual methods to apply were very simple. And I think it really helped. He and Natasha Campbell McBride, I would think, are my main two influences for getting me out of that trouble in 2010, 2011, 2012. And it was great. Jack became a friend and ended up doing the foreword to my book, Arthritis, the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me. And
Very
because he'd
cool.
seen my journey, and I did a talk with him in London in 2016 at the biohacking conference or biohacking summit or whatever it was called. And he became a great influence. And he's an extraordinary character. And some people he's a little bit too much for. And I can understand that. But his ideas on light, and he keeps telling me, be a light guru and not a food guru. But I would say I would challenge that in that there's so many myths built up around diet, so many that you need to break through those. And if somebody comes along with screaming psoriatic arthritis and they can hardly move, going out in the morning and getting some light in your eyes and getting red bulbs in your house is not going to do much initially. But it is a important part of the equation. However, dry fasting, full on PKD, all those things are going to show people that it's really something to do with the gut. Was it something to do with the gut initially, or to do with light and toxins and emotional disturbances? Well, all these things add up. But my awakening to that came one night when it was probably about 2012, and I was really emaciated still, and I wasn't sleeping, had a lot of pain. It was probably 2011, I think. And I had a lot of pain, and I thought, I would sleep like an hour here and there at night. And however good you're eating, you don't really heal if you're not sleeping. And I'd read a lot of Jack Kruse stuff, and I thought, right, okay, I'm going to dive in with the blue blockers and the cold thermogenesis. So I got in a freezing cold bath until I was shivering, and then I got out and I found I had hardly any inflammation just getting in that bath. And then I put some blue blockers on for the evening and sat there shivering because I was so skinny. I wasn't proper cold adapted. And I thought, I'm never going to sleep. So my eldest son, who is now 34, he was away at uni at the time. And I thought, right, I can't sleep in the bed with my missus because I'm just going to be shivering, rolling around, all that. I won't disturb her. I'll go sleep in my son's room. And I lay down in there freezing cold, couldn't warm up. And I thought, I'm never going to sleep. And the next thing I knew, I woke up 11 hours later in the same position. It was the best night's sleep I ever had. And it was like my body was craving it. And I thought, craving that sleep. And I thought, there's something in this. And from then on, we started to get rid of all the EMFs around the house, turning the router off at night, hardwiring it, dealing with all of that kind of thing, getting grounded as much as we could, even getting those grounding sheets and stuff. I'm not such a fan of those these days. I think you can get into trouble with some of the mains, if you're plugging them into the mains and whatever. If you run a lead out and put a copper rod in the ground outside, you'd probably be better off. But the grounding anyway. And getting the light sorted at night. So there wasn't any artificial light. There wasn't any blue light. And we do that to this day. And, at night, our living room looks strange. We got 3 snake cages in there. I do enjoy keeping snakes. And so we got, they got little LEDs in there, and they're on a different color in the day. But at night, just put them on dim and red. And that's about all the light we have. We even have a screen over the TV if anybody watches anything. And that doesn't let out any blue light at night. And it just, I go into somebody else's house and they got these like LED downlighters and whatever, and it just seems wrong. It seems almost painful now.
Okay.
And people say, well, it can't be that important. But if you look at it, all of nature is controlled by light cycles, isn't it? The
Mm.
seasons change, everything happens. The trees get leaves when it gets up to a certain light level and a certain sort of cycle of light and dark. All of nature wakes up. The animals know when to breed in the spring. And on the flip side of that, you get, battery chickens and whatever. And they put the strip lights on. They leave them on all the time, and it wrecks their hormones. They die young and whatever. But they also they lay around the clock, so they get a lot of eggs out of them. And it's disgraceful. This is the sort of thing that vegans think we condone, which we don't at all. Horrendous practice. And then women, the huge rates of breast cancer among women who work nights. And so you can see that this is really important. It's how nature works. And so yeah, I think it's very important to do that. However, I think that people who think that you can just go out in the sun and get all the sun you need and um, sit there and sunbathe your balls and your ass and whatever people do, so lying on their back and get really into it. It's all very well and it's brilliant, but if you're eating crap, you're still going to run into trouble. So it all
I
goes
think they
hand in
work
hand.
hand in hand. They work hand
Yeah.
in hand, and that was a beautiful explanation. Phil, can I ask, do you still do any of the cold exposure stuff?
No. Very, very rarely. Well, sometimes I'll go out in the morning and in the winter and I'll sort of take my top off to go and ground and have a bit of a sort of shiver walk or whatever around. I do a bit of that. And every now and again under the shower, I'll turn it to cold for a couple of minutes at the end, but nothing like I was doing.
Okay.
When I was that desperate and really
Mm.
I got so cold adapted, sort of cold baths every day. I was rolling around in the snow. I remember one amusing episode one morning when I was out barefoot with no top on early in the morning in the snow,
Mhm.
playing snowball fights with the kids out the front of the house and the missus. And this guy turned up, this bailiff turned up, great big guy. I was really skinny. I was still about 120 pound at the time. And this big burly bailiff turned up to try and find the guy who lived next door. He'd done something, that the bailiffs were onto him about. And he said to me, is so and so in? And I said, I have no idea where he is. And the guy said, he looked at me. I'd forgotten that I was there with a top off and whatever. And he said to me, if you're hard enough to stand out here like that in this weather, I'm not arguing with you. And he got in his
Yeah.
car and went back. But that level of cold exposure, not anymore. But a little bits here and there, yeah, it's kind of fun, especially in the winter. That's the important thing, you see, when people don't want to do it, it's the time to do it. Because in the winter we naturally felt cold. This is the importance of feeling the seasons. All of this circadian rhythm is not just day, it's also
Mm.
season. And so,
Mm.
of course, in the sun, go out in the sun, get the sun in the summer. In the winter, get cold
Mm.
sometimes. You don't have to do it all the time. You don't have to shiver away in a cave all day long, but get cold, to put a jumper on instead of turning the heating up. Go outside with fewer clothes on than everybody else.
Mm.
And that tells the body where it is in the yearly cycle.
Yeah, I agree. Was it you that was saying you crack the bedroom window in winter to try and let cooler air? Someone was telling me that recently. And
I do anyway, but I don't know whether it was me. But I mean, it's not only that, but definitely I don't like hot bedrooms. That's the worst thing.
yeah, I agree,
Hot airless
100%.
bedroom. No, no, no. Get the window open. And not only that, but for the light as well, because light is also particulate as well as rays, isn't it? So, you can let in some good natural light too, because we don't get natural light through glass. And so, and I think a lot of my issues actually, I had a great podcast as well on my Red Pill Buddhas podcast with Jack Cruz. And it ended up being a bit of a family consult. I didn't mean it to be that way, but we got into a load of things about my family and things that we've done. And I had contact lenses for 30 years as well through all that veggie stage. And I'd wear shades all the time. And I wasn't getting any natural light in my eyes. And I think this is something also that I haven't managed to resolve completely. Because when I was a kid, I'd go out in the sun and go absolutely dark brown straight away. We'd spend a lot of time in Spain, in Jordan. My parents had connections in Jordan, and we'd spend time there. And I'd be by the Red Sea in Aqaba, just no sunscreen, nothing, out all day, absolutely fine. And then during those 30 years of wearing contact lenses and also probably seed oils and getting fat, I couldn't take the sun. I hated it, absolutely hated it. And then after going carnivore, as we hear so often, sun tolerance went up, but it's nowhere near what it was. But now at least I like the sun and I go slightly brown, except a bit pink tinge. But, and I look not too bad unless I stand next to Anthony, who just goes brown immediately. And he did in Spain, the bastard. And so, other people have not destroyed their melanin like that. But I think, and I was talking to Sarah Pugh, who is also a wonderful genius on all of these kind of things, the quantum stuff. And she's become a great friend as well and was also speaking in Spain. But she was saying, yeah, you can get that back if you really, you go out and you get the light in your eyes and the light on your body at all times of day, not just jump out at midday and whatever, get it at every time of day. And you can reset that what do they could call it, the solar callus, and get that ability to create enough melanin as well. But melanin is used. I mean, Jack's latest podcasts about melanin are mind blowing when you see exactly what it does in the rest of the body, and it's not just something a pigment in the skin. But yeah, I pretty much wrecked that. And then I ended up having my eyes lasered in 2006, which is also dangerous, but at least I got through the dangers of that. And hopefully, touch wood, it's okay. But now I have great eyesight. I don't need glasses and whatever. I should have done it another way, maybe with Jake Steiner's methods on endmyopia.org that are very interesting. First heard him on one of Sean Baker's podcasts, actually going on about that, but very interesting methods for reversing short sight. But I think, yeah, I didn't have any natural light in my eyes. And as Jack Kruse once said, that if the food that goes into your mouth is not matching the light that goes into your eyes, then you're going to get mitochondrial disruption. And I think I did that for 30 years because I didn't have any natural light. My eyes were so sensitive, I'd get in the car even when it was cloudy and put some Oakleys on or whatever to drive. And I'd never use them now. Never wear sunscreen, never wear sunglasses or anything like that. I think it damages a lot of people, all of that kind of thing.
Phil, this has been a fantastic conversation. You are a font of knowledge, and I'm really grateful that you came on and shared everything here. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's a pleasure, mate. Thank you so much for asking me.
Thanks, Phil.